Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Hello folks, welcome back to World War II TV and the penultimate of our special Pearl Harbor 80th anniversary shows. And we've talked about various aspects this week. Today we are looking at some of the heroes. Now we will be talking about the Medal of Honor recipients for the Hawaiian Islands for December the 7th. I just want to get it out right at the beginning that of course on an event like that, there are many, many heroes and heroines there across the field, in the hospitals, on the airfields, on the ships. The Medal of Honor as a system can only acknowledge the very, very best of the best. And so, you know, there are lots of heroes that day. Medals are what they are. But my guest today wrote this rather good book called Hidden Heroes. Colonel Charles A. Jones, U.S. Marine Corps retired, is coming on to join us. And we will be talking about these heroes. So without further ado, I will introduce Colonel Jones. So good afternoon, sir. How are you today?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. And you, are you well?
I'm ready to go.
Good. So we are now live to the audience. So first question, you've obviously written and lectured about various aspects of the U.S. Marine Corps, the U.S. Navy, World War II history. What is it about Pearl Harbor that it makes it such a resonant subject for historians? Is it just because it is such an important day in the context of America in World War II?
Yes, I think it's probably one of the most important days in the history of the United States. So that's probably one reason why people are drawn to that and have such interest in it. It is obviously the event that brought us into World War II, which is the greatest conflict in the history of the world. And I guess that is one of the reasons that drew me to it.
Well, that makes sense to me. You know, we talk about on this channel, we talk about the big events, the big battles. They're the ones people talk, or not so much necessarily the big battles, but the significant battles. It always comes back to Market Garden, D-Day, Midway, Guadalcanal, and Pearl Harbor. But anyway, we are going to be talking about the Medal of Honor recipients. So, and you're going to talk generally as we go through the show about some of the rules and requirements for Medal of Honors and the language and terminology, because one of the things that particularly upsets me is the use of Congressional Medal of Honor. And I personally don't like the word winning when regarding gallantry medals. I prefer awarded, I prefer receiving. I just don't like the word winning. But anyway, that's another subject. But anyway, you have come here to talk about this subject. So we've got a PowerPoint, which we'll bring up on screen. So let's talk initially about where these Medal of Honors were, where people were when they received the Medal of Honor, because as you say in your book, we concentrate on what happened at Pearl Harbor, but of course it was the whole island that was under attack that day. But yeah, let's go through the Medal of Honor recipients and where most of them, for which actions they were awarded.
Well, for most of you, I don't know how familiar you are with Hawaiian geography, but the main site for the Medal of Honor recipients was Oahu, which is the location of the capital now that Hawaii is a state, and that is the island of Oahu. That's not the biggest island. The biggest island, ironically, is named the Big Island. But 14 of the Medal of Honor recipients were in the waters of Navy base Pearl Harbor, as it was known back then. And each one of the ships was moored along Ford Island, and they were moored to what's called mooring keys, although some may call that mooring quays. They were located off Ford Island, and Ford Island is the island in Pearl Harbor, and of course Pearl Harbor is in Oahu. So 13 of the Medal of Honor recipients were on ships on the famous Battleship Road. Probably everybody's heard that term. But one of the recipients was across the way from Battleship Road. He was on Carrier Road, which is on Ford Island opposite Battleship Road. We had one Medal of Honor recipient who was also on Oahu, but he was north of Pearl Harbor. He was at Naval Air Station Kaneohe Bay. He was the only 7 December Medal of Honor recipient on Oahu who was not at Pearl Harbor. And then probably what most people do not realize is that one of the 7 December Medal of Honor recipients was at Midway Islands. It's plural islands, but specifically the specific island was Sand Island. And the reason he's included is because, and I did not know this until I somehow found it out, Midway Islands are part of the Hawaiian Island archipelago. So they are a part of Hawaii. So that's why he is included among the 7 December Medal of Honor recipients, because Midway Islands, and specifically Sand Islands where he was, those islands are part of the Hawaiian Island chain. They're also called the Sandwich Islands.
And one of the things, when you kindly sent me a copy of your book, and I had a look at it, and it is, and folks, of course, as usual, the link to purchase Charles's book is in the description below, and I recommend it. It's got some interesting information in it. Is that it seemed to me that a lot of the information you discovered for this hadn't really been talked about before, which I was surprised at, considering, as we said at the top of the show, how monumental that day was, how insignificant it was, how well known it is. You ask most Americans, name something from World War II, they're going to say Pearl Harbor. Is that the investigation into the medals awarded hadn't seemed to be done before? Is that, I guess, because they were published at the time and as people took them at face value and there wasn't any need to go into a further level? Or do you just think no one had kind of got round to it? But why do you think they hadn't been really discussed before?
Well, let me make kind of an admin announcement. After I sent you my original narrative or presentation, I revised that. And in addition to the revision, I also made an addendum. And as I will make an admin announcement at the end of the program about that, while I was writing the addendum, I included a paragraph. I don't think that was in the main presentation I sent you. I simply do not know why the mainstream media in the United States, for lack of a better word, I'll say this, shuns this population of men, or specifically this population of Medal of Honor recipients. I do not know the answer to that. But what I found was their stories in the context of the story of 7 December being told. These men are either ignored, or their stories are partially told, or sadly, they are often told inaccurately. So I do not know why they are off limits. Maybe people just don't know about them. I don't want to think that people do not care about them, because their bravery is just off the scale.
I mean, maybe it's a simple thing that they happened early in the war, and so therefore more deeds happened later in the war, and the ones that happened in 44, 45 just seem to get more attention. And of course, people like talking about victories rather than talking about defeats. So maybe if you're a news journalist and you're wanting to do a story about World War II, talking about the victories of the Allies maybe gets better headlines than talking about the defeats. I don't know. I mean, bravery, though, I've always thought bravery is not requiring on winning or losing the battle. Bravery is bravery. You can be incredibly brave in a battle that is lost. You can be incredibly brave in a battle that is won. Bravery is irrelevant with regards to the outcome of the battle. So that's maybe an interesting take on it. But let's move into the presentation, and we'll talk about the actual individuals. So you wanted to make a point about the fact that every time we flash up an image, we're talking about the grade they had at the time of the medal, the action, because some of these people had subsequent careers and were promoted. And so it's one of those technicalities when you're talking about Medal of Honor recipients is which language you use. But these are the grades they had at the time. Is that correct?
Yes. And 2 points. You've already kind of alluded to one. Terminology. Number one is congressional is not part of the actual name of the medal. It's the Medal of Honor. It's not the Congressional Medal of Honor, point one. And point two, people always say rank instead of grade. At least in the United States, the proper term is grade. For example, a captain is a grade. That is not his rank. But now rank refers to precedence. So the captain will have the grade of captain, but he will have what's called a date of rank within all the population of captains to establish his seniority. So that's the difference between grade and rank.
I think it's one of those things that there are these terms that are understood by the general public with regards history that may not be the technical military term, but they have come to mean things. And I think in pretty much every book I read, it's conventional. The conventional writing word now is we use rank, but yeah, correct is great. I mean, it's semantics in many ways, but yeah, Medal of Honor is not the Congressional Medal, it's Medal of Honor, and these are the grades. But let's start moving through these individuals, and we'll go through their stories one at a time. And I'm putting up on screen, folks, the photo and the basic details there, and then Charles is going to fill us in the acts of bravery and the interesting points about some of these people, because when you go online, it's easy to find the actual citations for these awards, but there's always the backstory. There's always the reasons behind it. There's always these little notes, and that's what you've done, Charles, with your book. Is you've fleshed out these from just being citations to essentially full, complete stories. So there we are. Let's start with Captain Binyan there.
Yeah, one thing to notice right off the bat is some of these men were born in the 1800s. Which is, I think, significant. So keep your eye on those birth dates, because some of these men are of an much older generation. But apparently Captain Binyan was very much a gentleman. And on December 7th, he was the commanding officer of USS West Virginia, a battleship. Now, the BB is the designation for battleship, and the 48 is the hull number. And you'll see that throughout the presentation. He was mortally wounded through kind of a freak accident. He was outside his bridge when the attack was occurring. And his ship was outboard to the USS Tennessee, which was the inboard ship. A Japanese bomb hit a gun on one of Tennessee's turrets. It sent a fragment into the guts of Captain Binyan and mortally wounded him. So there's this poignant story of how I think it was 3 of the ship's officers plus 1 enlisted sailor tried to move him to comfort him, but he resisted the movement. And as we'll see later on, that's one of the common factors of the Medal of Honor award, is that the awardee is someone who resists evacuation when he's wounded. And you see March 4th, 1942, that was the date that President Roosevelt approved the initial group of Medal of Honor recipients for December 7th. And there were 14 of those men, as we'll see as we go along. So that date is important because that's the date of President Roosevelt's approval of the Secretary of the Navy's recommendation.
And for the benefit of the audience, do we know whether there are other application people put forward who didn't receive the Medal of Honor, or did all the ones that got as far as that kind of stage of the process actually go on to receive it?
No, I did not find any disapprovals. Everyone who was put forward by the Secretary of the Navy was approved. Now, we do have a problem with Warrant Officer Ferris, as when we get to him, he was originally awarded a Navy Cross. He and his captain tried to have that upgraded to a Medal of Honor, and the Navy said, go away. So that's kind of a disapproval, but ultimately the captain and Warrant Officer Ferris prevailed, as we see. We'll see later on. And but so no outright disapprovals that I know of.
And so was there again, I don't want to steal the thunder of what we're going to be saying as we go through them individually, but when you look at them as a collective set of gallantry awards. You know, you said there that a key theme is kind of resisting being evacuated. Is there any kind of other key theme that seems to connect them up, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think I've got a slide about that. Another common factor is staying on the job to the point of death. Right. You see that with Ensign Jones and Warrant Officer Reeves, who were on California. They organized a hand-to-hand ammunition passage when the mechanical hoists of the ship were disabled by a Japanese torpedo or bomb. And they did that to the point of their death. So staying at your station to the point of death or unconsciousness is another common factor, as we'll see.
Right. So with Binyan there, anything else you want to say about his case? Anything about it that's unusual or noteworthy? It's the first one we're covering. Is there anything that it sets a standard for?
Well, yeah, I don't know how I got this, and sometimes I don't know how I got a lot of this information, but I got a newspaper headline from Salt Lake City, which is where he was buried. It was a 1942 paper announcing that the family had received his Medal of Honor by mail. And some people may find that callous, but you have to remember that President Roosevelt could not present personally all the medals of honor that were awarded during the war. So some of them were literally sent by registered mail, both the medal and the citation.
Wow. Again, we have, I realize when it comes to something like the Medal of Honor, we have these ideas, we think, because so often when you see a case about a Medal of Honor, you see that award ceremony, you see that person there receiving it from a general, or in some cases, you see the mother or the wife receiving the award there. But that isn't always the case. Sometimes they did just go out by registered mail. It's interesting that there is not a set precedent for this. It depends where people are living and what the situation is and where they were serving and what the nature was. And it's interesting to look at the different dynamics of it, because I think generally the public would think there's a single system in place. And it's interesting that there isn't. It can vary from case to case.
Yeah, you'll see that President Harry Truman presented a lot of awards in person. I was told that he did not like to present in person posthumous awards to the families, but President Roosevelt did present, I think, just a handful of awards personally. But you have to remember, he was busy running the war in Washington, D.C., as was President Truman, who took over upon Roosevelt's death on April 12th, 1945. So these two men had their hands full. So they depended on other people to present the medals of honor in many cases. But you'll see quite a few photographs of President Truman, both during and after the war, presenting medals personally at the White House.
Yeah. And I guess we also have to consider the fact there's also the publicity side of medal allocations with all of our countries, Britain, America, is that, we think about Doolittle, for example, and Roosevelt was there to meet Doolittle and some of the raiders because it was a big news story. It was part of the morale of the country. It was helping people work harder in factories. So there's the PR angle as well that needs to be considered. The same thing applies to some of the British Victoria Crosses of people who were awarded them in front of the press because there was a need to kind of get that story out to the public for other reasons beyond just the bravery of the individual. But if we're finished with that first recipient, we'll move on to our second one. Now, I think of the initial one you sent through, this is one of the ones that is really quite fascinating.
Yeah, one thing about Binyan I wanted to say is
we'll go back.
I hope people notice that he had a Medal of Honor tombstone, and most of these men have that. You can see it at the bottom tombstone. Sometimes they have weird tombstones arrangements. I don't know why he has two, but the bottom one is a Medal of Honor grave, and you can tell that, one, because the lettering is gilded or in gold, and two, you can see at the top the Medal of Honor symbol. and obviously you see the word Medal of Honor under his name. So you'll see that in quite a few of the Medal of Honor tombstones.
But as we will find out, not exclusively. Some it isn't mentioned on their grave. Again, it's not a set rule.
Right. All of these men are not buried in the same way.
Yeah,
Correct.
of course. Yeah. So yeah, Lieutenant Cannon.
Yeah, Lieutenant Cannon is important in Marine Corps history, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say probably most Marines do not realize his place in history. He was the only Medal of Honor recipient from the Marine Corps for December 7th, 1941, and he was the first Marine Corps recipient in World War II.
Yeah,
and he was a first lieutenant. So among all the Marines, officer and enlisted, he was the first Medal of Honor recipient, and he was also for the Marine Corps. And he was also the only Medal of Honor recipient for December 7th who was not on Oahu.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, he was on Sand Island, Midway Islands, and which is part of the Hawaiian Islands. And the interesting thing about him is he was wounded on the evening of December 7th. I'm pretty sure that as the Japanese fleet was retreating, having bombed Oahu earlier in the day, 2 destroyers peeled off the formation and for some reason shelled Midway. And one of those shells hit the command post of First Lieutenant Cannon. Now, what you might ask, why are Marines on Midway? Well, they're part of the Island Defense Force. Yeah. There was a Marine Corps Defense Battalion whose responsibility was to protect the islands in the Pacific. And so to the left, you see his command post, and to the right, you see his memorial that is sadly on Midway. So Midway is closed to the public. It's very difficult to get there. So you can't see that except for a picture. Now, if I were in charge, I would put a duplicate Cannon memorial on Oahu so people could see it. But I'm not in charge. So it is as it is, as the saying goes.
And I guess he's the one that often is not on the, if you go to a regular kind of journalist list of Medal of Honor recipients for Pearl Harbor, he's not often on that list because, as you say, he wasn't actually at Pearl Harbor, but it was December the 7th. It was the same battle, the same action. So therefore it qualifies. But tell us exactly what he did to actually earn the medal. He was under part of the destroyers, but in his case, what was he doing personally?
Yeah, and I do want to say that, again, he was wounded in the evening of December 7th. So he's the first, he's the only Medal of Honor recipient for December 7th who was wounded after the morning attack on Oahu. Right, he was in his command post. He was commanding a battery, and the Japanese shelling hit his command post, broke his pelvis and his legs. And he refused evacuation, similar to the way Captain Binyan did. And he said, I'm not going to be evacuated until all the other people are evacuated. And I'm pretty sure in his Medal of Honor citation, he said it's said that he was left there until forcibly removed. Wow. He was taken to the Naval Air Station dispensary, where he died from a loss of blood. Now, this is an interesting aspect here. All of those details are not in his citation. A lot of those details came from the report of his commanding officer that I happened to find in one of the investigations of the Pearl Harbor, of the December 7th attack.
Mm. I've always wondered, because someone told me, like yourself, I get told things and sometimes I forget where I hear them from. But I was told that the people who actually wrote up citations for Medal of Honors had a certain kind of length of number of words they were suggested to use. And it meant that sometimes actions got reduced to just fit into that kind of standard length of text, which meant the key details of the action were sometimes omitted. Is that something you've heard as well?
No, I don't know that there was any template or formula for writing a Medal of Honor citation. For example, for Warrant Officer Ferris, and I'll confess right now, he's my favorite recipient. He has a rather extensive, a rather long citation, as does Lieutenant Commander Fuqua, who is also one of my favorite recipients. But if you look at the two Oklahoma recipients, Ensign Flaherty and Seaman First Class Ward, their citations are very, very short. But all of them have the same basic introductory language for bravery above and beyond the call of duty at the risk of life, territory of Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, or wherever it's located. And then it goes into the details of the action. But as I said, I found more detail about Cannon outside his citation by reading his commanding officer's report.
And I, for one, I'm thanking you for the work you've done to expand this knowledge, because for myself as a Normandy student of history, the Medal of Honor citations I read are only ever part of the story. You need to flesh it out with sometimes information, as you say, from the after action reports, morning reports, commanding officers' reports, even the individual deceased personnel files will sometimes include details that are important to actually understand the story. But we'll move on to our third recipient, and this is probably another one of the rather well-known ones, Petty Officer Finn there.
I would say, I hate to use this word, but I'll say it. He was probably the most popular December 7th Medal of Honor recipient, and I'll say he was probably the best known. Why that's true, I do not know. I want to say he lived to the age of 100, and he seemed for some reason to be a media favorite. So that's perhaps why he got a lot of exposure that the other recipients, living and dead, did not receive. I don't know the reason for that. Now, the important thing about him is, well, two important things. One, he was the only one on Oahu who was not at Pearl Harbor, the only recipient who was not at Pearl Harbor on Oahu. And two, he was the only recipient who actually engaged in what I'll call, it's probably not a politically correct phrase anymore, but he was engaged in man-to-man combat with the Japanese. Now, obviously, the Japanese didn't land their planes and have a duel with Chief Petty Officer Finn. He was on the ramp of the Naval Air Station shooting a .50 caliber machine gun at the planes passing over. So I guess in those circumstances, that is about as personal as you can get. Now, you also notice that his date of approval is different. For some reason, he was not in the original batch of 14. So his was approved not in March like the other 14, but his was approved in June of 42. And maybe it's because he was in Kaneohe Bay and he wasn't known. I don't know. And it will go back to your point about the differences in burials. And this really surprised me. I was able, through a very kind fire chief who lived near where Finn was buried, sent me a picture of Finn's grave, and all it says is John Finn with his life dates and death dates. It does not say Medal of Honor, and that surprised me. I was looking for a Medal of Honor grave for all people. He would seem to have one, but he did not.
It is interesting. These differences are just fascinating, and I'm wondering whether one of the reasons he became better known, well, obviously he lived, which made a difference, although he wasn't the only recipient to live, is that his action was also portrayed, of course, in the movie. I mean, you don't get him by name, but he's kind of in Tora Tora Tora, isn't it? They do have the guy there at the air base with the machine gun there, so maybe a bit of fame from that, possibly, I don't know. And the later date of approval is also fascinating. Again, as a Normandy guy, I always think of it. The legend is that Jimmy Monteith, who received the Medal of Honor at Omaha Beach, his citation was Roosevelt agreed his last, or Eisenhower agreed his last, because it was an actual aggressive Medal of Honor. He was actually trying to take the war to the enemy, where the other ones had been kind of life-saving ones, and they wanted one that was more in the spirit of kind of defeating the enemy as opposed to saving lives. And that's why it was the last one. So I'm wondering whether that's another reason they were looking for one to show an aggressive spirit rather than defensive spirit. I don't know. I'm just sort of spitballing there, but it's possible.
I don't know. The other thing to note was not only he brave by standing out there in the open on the ramp shooting at the Japanese, but he was wounded several times. I think somewhere I've got the number of wounds he had, but it was like First Lieutenant Cannon, Finn pretty much had to be ordered to go seek medical attention. And even after he got the medical attention, you know, he was like a wind-up robot. He wouldn't stop. He continued doing things like rearming planes and supervising around the hangar. He was an aviation guy, as you can see, aviation ordnanceman. So that means he was around, in his case, patrol aircraft, which I assume were the famous PBY cavalry.
Yeah. I mean, there does seem that another recurring theme is a stubbornness these men show. Is that they won't be told to stop, even though when logic is telling them to stop. There's that whether it comes out of adrenaline, whether it comes out of something in the way their brains work, but there's a stubbornness of just a refusal to give in and you know, take the care you need. It's an extraordinary connection between these individuals. But yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, every single one of these medals, it's an amazing story. And I don't want to keep saying to every single one, what an amazing story. But of course, they are all amazing stories because they are Medal of Honor stories. So, of course,
yeah, I'm sorry, but I think the word that you're looking for is tenacity.
Tenacity, yeah.
In that picture you just showed of him, the second picture, by the way, that for those of you who do not know and who have not been to the Arizona Memorial, as I have been an embarrassingly high number of times, if you look at the very top of that list, you'll see United States Navy. And that is the list of the dead and missing on the wall at the Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor. Now, if you followed Chief Petty Officer Finn's, well, actually, he ended up as a lieutenant when he retired. If you followed his right arm down to around his hand, you would see on the list of or the engravings of the medal of the missing and dead, a special section for Marines. Right. So your next question is, why would we have Marines listed on the Arizona list of missing and dead? You have to remember that back in the 1940s, and I think up until, I don't know, at some point the Marines quit providing the Navy with Marines to station on ships. But back in his day, in the 1940s, Marines were stationed on ships, such as battleships, carriers, and cruisers. And they were in what were called Marine detachments. Yeah. So that's why you see the names of dead and missing Marines at Pearl Harbor. And you see that also at the Oklahoma Memorial, one of the newer memorials. I think that was opened in 2007. You would notice a lot of Marines.
Yeah, it's one of those things we get about Normandy, is that were there Marines in Normandy? We go, well, they did not, very few set foot on the shore, but of course the capital ships had a Marine contingent, as you said there. So there were Marines on the Texas and the other ships that day, and a few came ashore as advisors. But yeah, it was one of those continuing precedents of having Marines on the larger ships there. But we'll move on because we've got so many to cover, folks. So we're going to move on to another incredible story. I'm going to say that many times. And over to you again, Charles.
Yes. Ensign Flaherty was on USS Oklahoma. The problem with Oklahoma is Oklahoma was an outboard ship. That meant that its left or port side was exposed to the waters of Pearl Harbor and was right across from Southeast Lock. I think the informal name for Southeast Lock was Torpedo Alley, because the Japanese simply had to drop torpedoes in that channel, and they would go across Pearl Harbor and hit the ships on their sides. And that's what happened to California. That's what happened to Oklahoma. That's what happened to Utah on the other side of Ford Island. But the problem with that is, at least with Oklahoma, is it caused the ship to almost completely capsize. The only reason it didn't completely capsize is I think the mast stuck in the mud at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. So it didn't turn completely over. But I can't really get a feeling of exactly what his duties were. But what he did was he stayed in a gun turret and held a light so the rest of the crew could escape. And by doing that, he sacrificed his own life. He perished aboard the ship. He was listed as missing in action, but in 2019, our agency in the United States government that identifies the bodies of war dead and war missing identified his remains as they were found. And we may have a slide of this later on. If you go to Punch Bowl, you'll see, well, you may not see this now because of the exhumations, but if you go to Punch Bowl, you'll see a whole lot of tombstones that will read Oklahoma Unknowns. But he was found in one of those unknown graves, identified, and then he was buried this year, 2021, in Michigan, his home state.
And we've been reminded, George Newman is watching, said is 2 more Oklahoma unknowns have been identified in the last few weeks. So it's an ongoing process. So it's that's fascinating. So they're still doing work to put names to the lost, which is, for something that was 80 years ago, is really quite fantastic.
Yeah, I only found out about this through Gail Alvarez, who is the head of the Medal of Honor Historical Society. And I think I put in a plug for her at the end. Now, what this is what's called an IMO. It's an in memory of marker. And what these are used for is to indicate someone who is missing in action, whose body has not been recovered. But now we know that Ensign Flaherty's remains have been recovered and identified, but this will probably still stand. But you'll see this for other men. And again, you'll notice Medal of Honor with a Medal of Honor symbol, and the lettering is all gilded, or again, it's covered in gold. But it just marks an empty grave for someone who's missing in action, or who was killed, but the body was not recovered.
But it's just an interesting point to mention, and that while we historians are continuing to rewrite the actions of World War II and reinvestigate and reanalyze and learn more, that the process of putting details to those who fell is still an ongoing process. It's not just happening with World War II. In First World War, Australia and New Zealand are still putting names to unidentified casualties on the Somme and the First World War. So technology is allowing more work to be done to bring closure to families, to complete stories, which is really nice to know. There are people out there who think that everybody's forgotten about history. Well, some people have, but there are a lot of people who are very interested in history and keeping it and preserving it and finding out more information. But we'll move on because we've got so many to go. You said this is one of your other favorites.
Yeah, he's probably my second favorite Medal of Honor recipient. He was one of 3 from Battleship Arizona. BB, again, is Battleship, and 39 is the whole number. And a point to be made here is that there are only 2 ships from December 7th still in Pearl Harbor. One, obviously, is Arizona, that has the memorial that's so familiar to everybody. But Utah is also still in Pearl Harbor, and it has a memorial, but it's on Ford Island, which is an active military base. So the general public cannot get to that memorial. But you see again that key date. He was one of the original 14, who was approved by President Roosevelt, March 4th, 1942. He was the damage control officer aboard the ship, and he was also what's called the first lieutenant. And maybe some of your naval audience can help me out here, but I think the first lieutenant's job is kind of the deck officer. His responsibility is to look after the deck. Damage control is exactly what it says. And basically what he did, he was the senior surviving officer. He was a lieutenant commander at the time. He was the senior surviving officer on December 7th. And he had to give the order to abandon ship because he realized that the ship couldn't be saved. So he supervised the removal of wounded and burned men from the ship. And I think he was probably the last one to get off the ship, but he knew the ship could not be saved. And if you read his Medal of Honor citation, it's quite incredible. He was the epitome of the officer who takes charge and who remains calm and cool, and who sets an example for the junior members of the command as a good officer should. And apparently him doing that saved lives and maybe prevented panic, because he himself was not panicking.
And it's worth mentioning, because we talked about, when we did a show yesterday about the nurses in the hospitals, in that as brilliant as they were doing something they were trained to do. As a nurse, you are there to treat the wounded and give them attention. Pearl Harbor was so shocking and so sudden that people are doing things way out of what they've been trained. No one goes into the Navy and is trained what to do when a capital battleship rolls on its side. You're going way beyond anything these people could have possibly perceived. And understandably, in that situation, there are a lot of people who just don't know what to do. It's such a huge, horrible event that they have no kind of process to follow. So you need these individuals like the commander here who can just keep that level head and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We are going to do that. And again, that seems to be perhaps a connecting element between these Pearl Harbor Medal of Honor stories, is that they have this ability to find solutions to things and keep functioning in an environment that is incredibly hostile and scary.
Yeah. And again, he was a lieutenant commander, not a commander. And yeah, I agree with the way you summarized that. Now, maybe we're getting a little bit ahead, but here's his Medal of Honor grave in Arlington, Virginia. And you'll see that he is all of a sudden a rear admiral rather than a lieutenant commander. And the reason for that was when he retired as a captain in the normal retirement process, because of his combat record, he was promoted what's called a Tombstone Promotion.
Yeah. And
we'll see that with some other of these recipients. And you'll see that on it's called a Tombstone promotion because that promotion goes on his tombstone. So under Medal of Honor, you see RADM, meaning Rear Admiral. So he was promoted to Rear Admiral, 2 stars. At the time, the Navy obviously didn't have a 1-star grade.
Yeah.
So that's why Fuqua is listed as a Rear Admiral.
And I have to say, when you sent me the information, I was aware that some people are buried with a rank or grade beyond what they achieved. But I'd never heard of the expression, a tombstone in this sense. So I love learning these details because it's none of us know everything, and it's just it's fascinating to understand the details behind this. But we'll keep moving forward. Again, we've got lots of points to do at the end of this show. But another incredible story, and another guy born in the previous century.
Right, and I want to go back to one more thing about Fuqua is
sure.
You said that these guys, just really didn't know what to do in the face of this attack. You have to remember that these are Navy guys who are expecting to be in naval combat.
Yes,
they're not expecting aerial attack. They're expecting to go slug it out with a Japanese battleship, not with planes from a Japanese aircraft carrier. So that may be one of the reasons why they didn't know what to do.
Yeah. And in port as well. I mean, you can maybe expect to be attacked by aircraft, but not in a port where the theory was that it was too shallow for torpedoes. But that's another subject for another day. We covered that on Monday with my story and then. But let's get back to Hill.
Yeah, he was a chief warrant officer aboard Nevada. Again, one of the guys born in the 1800s. Apparently, he went into he was on the battleship Nevada. Apparently, he went into Pearl Harbor at the waters of Pearl Harbor and helped to release the lines that were mooring Nevada to Ford Island. And he had to swim back to the ship. And Nevada was the only battleship that got underway on December 7th. But as it steamed towards the channel connecting Pearl Harbor with the Pacific Ocean, in other words, it goes down southward. If you're headed out of Pearl Harbor, it goes southward to the Pacific Ocean. The fear was that the battleship, which drew a lot of attention from the Japanese because it was moving, the order was given, I guess, from headquarters on the land, ordering the ship to ground at a place called Hospital Point. And that's one of the places that is really off limits to you guys, but I had access because of my military ID, and I'm hoping we have a slide of that. So you'll get to see some of these things I could see that you could probably never see.
Yeah, we'll do the slides towards the end, Charles. We've got them later on, but yeah.
Yeah, and he was killed while the crew was trying to ground there at Hospital Point. He was blown overboard while he was trying to let the anchors go.
Yeah, they have a kind of a connecting tissue, but they're all slightly different. But it's courage under fire. It's thinking of things and solutions. And again, his grave, and I found this photo today, does acknowledge the Medal of Honor award there.
Yeah, that's his grave in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, better known as Punch Bowl. And it's on Oahu.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to see the grave. So we'll keep on moving through because lots more to do. Another ensign, and I'll hand over to you for the story.
Right, he's from the California. Now, remember, California had 4 Medal of Honor recipients, which was the most for December 7th. And it was the most for the war, except for USS San Francisco, which also had 4. So those 2 ships had the highest number of medals of honor for one action. He was aboard ship. I guess it was just a generic ship officer. And the problem with California was the torpedoes that hit its port or left side, I guess together with the bombs, compromised the electrical hoists that were used to hoist ammunition from below decks to the anti-aircraft guns above decks. And so he, along with Chief Warrant Officer Reeves and Warrant Officer Ferris, in light of not having the mechanical hoist, they set up a hand-to-hand way for people to handle the ammunition to pass it up by hand to the anti-aircraft batteries. And then he was hit, and if you'll see, you can look at his citation and his words when people tried to help him. Again, another guy who refused evacuation. His words were something to the effect that, "Leave me alone, I'm done for, get out of here before the magazines explode." And he was buried in California near San Diego. Again, one of the original 14 Medals of Honor, as you can see by the March 4th, 1942 approval date.
Wow. And I've just realized Janet Oakley, who did a show with me about Norway a few months ago, her mum's cousin is George Cannon. So we've actually got someone watching who is related to one of these recipients. So that's and she's already a fan and a follower of World War II TV. So it's an amazingly small world, Charles. We've got a little personal connection there. So, Yeah, she joined the show after we did George's story, so you'll have to rewind and watch from the beginning, Janet, to get the story. We covered it earlier.
Yeah, speaking of Cannon's family, I did not know this until I was writing an article for after the battle about these men. Cannon has a marker in Glen Cove Cemetery. I forget the state right offhand, but that's his family cemetery plot in Glen Cove. I think it's Missouri. And
well, maybe Janet will jump in and tell us.
Yeah, it was just simply a marker with his name on it, no indication of Medal of Honor, just saying he was killed on December 7th. Wow. And this is the Jones grave near San Diego at Fort Rosecrans.
Yeah, well, but these are just amazing, brilliant stories. So we'll keep on going. But this one, folks, there's a little bit of a different. Charles has gotten a different opinion about this one here, which I can't wait to hear. So this is Rear Admiral Kidd. So one of the more famous ones, but you've got some interesting research you've done on this one.
Right. First thing I want to point out is he was on Arizona, which is a hull number 39 battleship, obviously. Yeah. And the picture that you see, he has 4 stripes on his sleeves. That indicates he is a Navy captain. And ironically, and you see on the life preserver, his right hand, USS Arizona, he was the commanding officer of Arizona at one point. I think maybe just before he was promoted to Rear Admiral. And again, the Navy at that time did not have a 1-star grade. Right. So a Navy captain who was pay grade 06 went directly to pay grade 08, which was 2 stars or a Rear Admiral. And the reason he was on the ship was he was the commander of Battleship Division 1, which comprised the Arizona as his flagship and 2 other battleships, and I can't recall those other 2 battleship names. So that's why Rear Admiral Kidd was aboard the battleship, and that's why he perished there. People probably wonder what's a Rear Admiral doing on a battleship. Yeah. That's why. Now, do you want me to go ahead at this point and say why I think it's
let's do it now. Yeah, we can. I think we can recap later on, but while we've got his picture up on screen, let's do it now.
Yeah, when you to go back to basics, in the military, you probably heard this before, or maybe not. But in the general rule is you give great deference to the on-scene commander or to the on-scene command. So the Fleet Board of Awards at Pearl Harbor in early 1942 made 12 recommendations for medals of honor. Rear Admiral Kidd and Captain Van Valkenburg, who was the captain or the commanding officer of Arizona, were not among the original 12 recommendations for medals of honor. So the Fleet Board, and I have no documentation of this, but by military protocol, the Fleet Board would have had to have gone through Admiral Chester Nimitz, who was the head of the Pacific Fleet or Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet. And then it went to the Navy Board of Permanent Awards in Washington, D.C., which pretty much agreed with what the Fleet Board had recommended. But towards the end of the report, and I could not, for the life of me, get a copy of the Fleet Board of Awards report. So the only way I happened to find it was, again, by chance. And that chance and luck play so much of a part in the research here. In Kidd's official military service record, I found the report of the Navy Permanent Board of Awards that said, okay, the Fleet Board did not recommend Kidd or Van Valkenburg for medals of honor. But we, as the permanent board in Washington, D.C., are going to add their names. And they did so without any factual support for their awards, just a recommended citation. And the report reads that this action was done at the direction of the Secretary of the Navy. which leads me to believe that these are, for lack of a better term, political awards. And one explanation was that any commander of a ship or ships who died on December 7th got a Medal of Honor. You saw that with Captain Binyan, who commanded West Virginia. You see that with Rear Admiral Kidd, who commanded 3 battleships. And you see that with Captain Van Valkenburg, who commanded Arizona. So if you read their citations, in my opinion, they are the weakest citations there are. And again, I think it's a political award, and I have no proof for this, but my gut feeling is that a lot of these naval officers were on President Roosevelt's radar because he had been the Assistant Secretary of the Navy before. So he probably knew a lot of these guys, and he might have put the bug in the Secretary of the Navy's ear, said, hey, let's get a Medal of Honor for these 2 guys aboard Arizona. That's just supposition.
Yeah.
But all I can say is there's no, in that report I found in Kidd's service record, and again, that was a chance find. There are no facts supporting the Medal of Honor recommendation.
I mean, what we're saying, to quantify, we're not saying he didn't do enough to deserve it. We're saying there's no record of him doing anything enough to deserve it, because there's a slight distinction on that, isn't it? In that, just because there isn't any documentation doesn't mean he didn't. But likewise, that doesn't mean that he did either. It's just that there isn't anything there recorded that would normally be enough to receive the Medal of Honor. That's what we're saying, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Your reference to the term historical record is a good one. The historical record lacks any support for what these 2 men did. And I'm not I want people to understand, I'm not criticizing the 2 men or questioning their bravery. It's just the question of whether or not they deserved medals of honor for what they did or did not do. And there's just simply no evidence that they did anything warranting a Medal of Honor. They were not held to the nearly impossible standard that Warrant Officer Ferris was held to, and the other Medal of Honor recipients were held to.
And this is where it gets into that complication of what grade you have and who witnesses it. And everybody I've ever met who served in any branch of the military from any country has always said inherently medals can never be entirely fair, because life isn't fair. Not every person who does something extraordinarily brave can be decorated for it. And sometimes some people get medals for things that aren't particularly extraordinarily brave. It's just life isn't fair, and medals are one of those examples of life not being fair. And we'll kind of leave it at that and move on to our next story. So and Kidd's grave is a family grave. I found this photo this afternoon. So he's on there with a whole number of members of his family. Yeah,
now that's at the cemetery at the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Yeah. And
we can talk about that later on, because a number of them had been in Annapolis, and that's another. When we go do our summing up later on, that's one of the points we'll make later on. But let's get on to Ferris, who you said is your favorite.
Yeah, he's my favorite. Ferris was aboard the California, and he initially received the Fleet Board of Awards initially recommended him for a Navy Cross, and his captain, who was later relieved as captain and promoted to another job, it wasn't relief for a bad reason. He retired during the war as a Rear Admiral, and he thought, and I'm sure Ferris thought, that what Ferris did was worth far more than a Navy Cross. So the 2 of these men fought the Navy from, we'll say, 1946 to 1948, and you can see that he did not receive his Medal of Honor until 1948. So I think it was 6.5 years after his action, and by then the president was Harry Truman, and this was the last December 7th Medal of Honor approved. And in Ferris, if you read Ferris's citation, you are just absolutely stunned with what he did. And I was reading over some of the supporting documents yesterday, and it's what he did was just phenomenal. He was largely responsible for keeping the ship fighting during the attack, number one, and number two, he saved the ship from the gruesome fate of Utah and Oklahoma, which was capsizing because the ship had been hit on the port side with torpedoes. It was listing to the port side. It would have capsized, but Ferris, acting on his own as a warrant officer, ordered counter flooding. So that meant that water came in from the opposite side of the ship to stabilize the ship so it would not capsize. Now, you have to remember that the commanding officer was not aboard the ship. I think he was, he had spent the night ashore. So Ferris is doing all this, taking all these actions, pulling people out of mud, not mud, but of oil, despite all the disabling fumes, despite the fact that he was knocked up to the overhead, which is military terminology for the ceiling, and back down to the deck and was injured. He kept on going and saved a lot of sailors. And there's an action that is not in his citation that I remembered yesterday. A gun had misfired on the ship. It's called a hang fire. The shell is ignited, but it doesn't explode. So he was called up there to straighten that out. He pulled the shell. I'm pretty sure he pulled the shell out of the gun, which was a dangerous thing to do. And then he threw it overboard. So he was kind of a jack of all trades, and you just feel sorry for him, and because he should have gotten a Medal of Honor with the original group in 1942, but he had to fight for it and got it in 1948. And as I alluded to earlier, he was held to an almost impossible standard of proof, but he passed it. And so he got his Medal of Honor. And you see his Medal of Honor grave in the cemetery at Arlington, Virginia. And at the very bottom, which you can't read, it says PH and GS. That means Purple Heart and Gold Star. With the Purple Heart, his first award of a Purple Heart, and the Gold Star is his second award of a Purple Heart. So he did not get 2 Purple Heart medals. The first time he got the medal, and then the second time he gets a Gold Star, he puts on the ribbon of the medal. Yeah. And you can see him to the far left here. He has just received his Medal of Honor from President Truman, who is third from the left. Yeah. Now, I found out something interesting yesterday about President Truman. He said at these presentations that he would rather have a Medal of Honor than be president of the United States. Now, he knew what the Medal of Honor was for 2 reasons. Number one, he had seen combat as an artillery battery commander in World War II.
Yeah.
World War I.
Yeah.
And 2, he had presented plenty of medals of honor in after and during World War II. But I thought that was an interesting comment. He'd rather have a Medal of Honor than be president.
Yeah, interesting comment. We'll move forward. So a similar story. Warrant Officer Reeves.
Yeah, Warrant Officer Reeves was another one who helped aboard California when the power went out and the ammunition hoists did not work. So he was one of the men or leaders who helped this ammunition train, TRAIN, pass ammunition from hand to hand. Now, he was overcome by smoke and fumes, and I'm pretty sure he died aboard the ship because of that. So, and he is buried at Punch Bowl.
Yeah, amazing. And there's his grave there.
Yeah, there's his grave at Punch Bowl. And you can see the Medal of Honor symbol up in the upper right.
Yeah. Moving on. Another well-known one, again, because he lived a substantial time, but Donald Ross.
Right. Yeah, he was a warrant officer. He was a machinist. He was aboard Nevada. Now, I want to take on one myth here that I may get to again later on. The main myth is that either Ross or Finn was the first one to receive a Medal of Honor in World War II. That is incorrect. An Army lieutenant who was killed in the Philippines in 1942 actually was the first recipient of a Medal of Honor. His was approved in, I think, February 5th of 1942, which is before the December 7th awards. Now you can see here that he has the 4 stripes of a Navy captain. He was retired as a Navy commander, which is 3 stripes, but because of his combat record, he was given the Tombstone Promotion to captain. So that's why you see him in a captain's uniform or with captain's insignia. Yeah. And the other thing is, if you look at his ribbon, his Medal of Honor ribbon, it is upside down. You can see it on the black and white photo. It looks like a W. Actually, it should look like an M. But, you know, who's to argue with somebody like him?
Yeah, exactly. And remind us what he did.
Yeah, he was another one who, to use my word, tenacity, who just simply stayed at his battle station and refused to leave and made everybody else leave. And he stayed despite becoming incapacitated. When he was revived, he went back to the battle station and he stayed there until he was ordered to leave. So we go back to that common characteristic of tenacity.
Yeah, incredible stuff. And another guy, machinist mate, Scott.
This is another one of California's 4 Medal of Honor recipients among the original group. There you see by the March 4th, 1942 approval date. He died aboard the ship. And again, this was a first-class petty officer, so he was enlisted. He stayed at his battleship at his battle station at the cost of his life. He was in a space with an air compressor, and his words were, and you see him in the citation, this is my battle station. I'm going to stay here as long as they need air. And he is buried at Arlington, Virginia. I have seen the 3 Arlington burials in person. Warrant Officer Ferris, Lieutenant Commander Ferris, Rear Admiral Fuqua, and machinist mates First Class Scott. I have seen all 3 of those graves.
No, it's absolutely extraordinary stuff. And we'll keep on moving. And another chief petty officer. So, but a different ship this time. Different type of story entirely, really.
Oh, we could talk for I don't know, an entire day about this. I'll try to abbreviate it. But he was no offense, but I don't know any other term to use. He was a foreigner to Americans because he was born in Prologue, which was apparently a part of Austria or the old Yugoslavia or something like that. But he was not a native of the United States, but must have been naturalized at some point. Now, the Utah was built as BB-31, a battleship, but in the 30s, I think 1931, it was converted to a gunnery and target ship. It was stationed opposite Ford Island on what was called Carrier Row, not Battleship Row, and it was moored there. And I do not think the Japanese were supposed to hit it, but in the excitement of battle, the Japanese in fact dropped torpedoes on it, and so that ship capsized. But again, it didn't capsize 180 degrees. And we go back to that factor of tenacity. Tomich, being in the engineering spaces, stayed at his station until he made sure the boilers were secured. Now, secured is Navy terminology for turned off. Yep. So he made sure the boilers were turned off and made sure everybody else was removed from the space, and he lost his life while doing those actions. And he's still missing in action, and his name is on here we see this is a typical inscription for a Medal of Honor recipient at Punch Bowl, not at the graves, but a place called the Honolulu Memorial, which is operated by the American Battle Monuments Commission. And this indicates men who are lost in action or who were killed and their bodies were not recovered. So this is what you see here with Talmadge.
Yeah.
So, but again, the important part is that was not a battleship on that date, even though it had been.
Yeah.
Or she was not that way. And the memorial is quite beautiful. I don't know if we have a picture of the memorial, but again, it's off limits to civilians because Ford Island is an active military base, a subsidiary of Naval Station Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, we've got your photos. We'll do them a bit later on, Charles. So we've got three more recipients, and then we'll do the general points of discussion.
Right.
So we've already mentioned Valkenburg, but we'll recap.
Yeah, Captain Van Valkenburg was the commanding officer of Arizona, hull number 39. And the same argument I made about Rear Admiral Kidd could be made about Captain Van Valkenburg. Although Lieutenant Commander Fuqua ran into an ensign in the hospital not long after the attack, and the ensign reported that the captain had gone to the bridge and had received some type of report from somebody, I guess over the telephone. And then according to the ensign, the ship blew up as if an earthquake had hit it, knocked it up, and then it settled. And of course, he perished like Rear Admiral Kidd aboard the ship. And again, I found no facts indicating specific acts of bravery warranting a Medal of Honor for him. Same argument as with Rear Admiral Kidd. But again, not to attack these men personally or question what they might have done on December 7th. I'm just saying the evidence, and remember, I'm a lawyer, the evidence is missing as to what supports a Medal of Honor.
A specific claim of exceptional bravery. Yeah, we're not saying
where
he didn't. We're just saying,
where you have
where the evidence is.
Yeah, where you have witness statements as to what Fuqua did. Now, here's a common mistake. People think Van Valkenburg, that Valkenburg is his last name and Van is his first name. That's how stupid some people are. And that's how many mistakes can be made. There's also a passage in a kind of a famous book where the author writes that so-and-so consulted the commanding officer of Arizona, Captain Van Valkenburg, with Van as his first name, which is nonsense.
Yeah, it's obviously European. These are Dutch and German names and immigrants. But this I believe he's our youngest, isn't he?
Yes, he's our youngest, and he's our baseball player. I thought I had in my file somewhere that he was on a Pacific Fleet baseball team, but I couldn't find that. But in a questionnaire that his parents had filled out, they mentioned that he was on the ship's baseball team. And he did virtually the same thing that Ensign Flaherty did. If you look at their citations, they're virtually identically worded. What Ward did, and it's not clear if he was in the same turret as Flaherty was, but Ward remained behind and held a flashlight so everybody else could get out of the turret, and that cost him his life. Now, unlike Flaherty, whose remains were identified, Ward's were not.
Yeah, but we have a marker.
Yeah, and he also has Ward Field named after him at the Naval Station Pearl Harbor. I passed it 1,000 times, and finally I looked at it, the map, and I saw it was identified as Ward Field. And finally, the brain works slowly. I said, holy cow, that's named after him. And there was supposedly a monument there, but I could never find that. Now, this is in Springfield, Ohio. Again, it's an IMO, or in memory of, marker. And that indicates simply an empty grave to indicate a person who was not recovered, missing in action or killed but body not recovered.
And we've just had Rainier, a Dutch viewer, reminding us that Van Valkenburg is a Dutch family name. There was a town in the south of the Netherlands called Valkenburg, and Van simply means from. So there we are. It's a town in South Netherlands. So the information is all coming in. It's a wonderful resource, the internet. We get this information coming in, confirming things. So that's thank you, Rainier, for sharing that with us.
Hey, that's good to know. So now I know that his first name is From, not Van.
From. Yeah, his first name is effectively From. Yeah, it's like Icelandic names ending son, which means son of. Anyway, you mentioned this earlier on, that the number of markers that talk about the unknowns, and this is this process that is ongoing to put names to some of these. There's a typical one there of 7 unknowns from the Oklahoma.
Yeah, this is what you'll see now. I don't know if this is what you see now, because I don't know if these stones have been moved for exhumation processes, but in the upper right corner, you see an O. That means that the marker is in section O of Punch Bowl, the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific on Oahu. It's because they didn't know the identities of these unknowns, they were placed in that type of grave. And sometimes it just says unknown. There's no ship given. Commander Young was maybe the saddest case. I don't know. They're all sad in a way, but he was on a repair ship. All the other ships on Battleship Row were battleships. His was a repair ship, hence the designation AR. He was aboard the ship. He went to he was moored next to Arizona, but Arizona was pointed as if it were leaving the harbor. The vessel was pointed the other way. So what happened was Young took charge of an anti-aircraft battery. He was blown overboard. He got back on the ship, regained his senses, and he realized that the oil fires between his ship and Arizona, which was moored next to his ship, were a danger to Vestal. So he ordered that Vestal be moved to a safer position, and then he even moved it to a safer position by grounding it at a, I think it's called AIEA Shoals, AIEA Shoals in Pearl Harbor. So he grounded his own ship. He received, and we go back to the presentation aspect, you can see he was one of the original of the 14 by the March date. So the approval was by President Roosevelt, but obviously President Roosevelt is not going to travel to Oahu, and Commander Young is not going to travel to Washington. So Admiral Nimitz presented the Medal of Honor to Commander Young, who had been promoted in the meantime to Captain Young. So this is showing him as a commander with 3 stripes on his shoulder boards, but he ended up with 4. Now, he was one of 5 men who survived, Medal of Honor men who survived the attack, but he was lost on, of all days, for those of you who are superstitious, he was lost on a Friday the 13th in 1942 at the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. He was the commanding officer of a cruiser named USS San Francisco, which had ironically been at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. He was killed in naval combat on the 13th as the commanding officer of USS San Francisco. He was either buried at sea or his body wasn't recovered, because you have to remember the nature of naval combat. It's kind of messy when you've got those big guns going off. So he is remembered in 2 places. He's remembered by that's his Medal of Honor at the old, it was called the Nimitz Museum. Now it's something like the National Museum of Pacific War History. It's in Fredericksburg, Virginia, the hometown of Chief Admiral Nimitz. But Young was remembered in 2 places. He was remembered in memory of marker in South Carolina, ironically near the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, which is aboard a ship. And he's also remembered in the Philippines at Manila American Cemetery on the walls of the missing. You see his name engraved in gold with a Medal of Honor symbol.
Well, this has been brilliant. We've done the individual stories. Now we're going to kind of go back and go over some of the things again and talk about some of the general rules and regulations and requirements and some of the common themes. And you've given us these kind of talking points there. And I think we've kind of addressed some of these things a little bit as we got along. But let's go through it one by one, because certainly those who are watching this that are British or European, I think we could do with a bit more of a lesson in Medal of Honor etiquette and history. So, the first point there about what does it recognize and what proof is needed to support, I think is really interesting.
Right. The Medal of Honor recognizes bravery or gallantry in action above and beyond the call of duty at the risk of the life of the person taking the action. And it's an award that was established by Congress in 1861. And it's funny, in the statute, it refers to bravery during the present war, which obviously then was our Civil War. And it has evolved over the years. It first was only available for enlisted personnel, but now by World War II, it was available for all personnel, Army and Navy officer and enlisted. And it has to be above and beyond the call of duty. And it has to be something that if the guy did not do, he would not be censured for not doing it. And it can't be to the detriment of the mission. And also, there was another point I wanted to make. It has to be awarded for action against an enemy of the United States. So it has to be a combat action. Although, and we don't have time to get into this, a Navy diver who died in the West Lock of Pearl Harbor, which was not attacked on December 7th, he died during a rescue mission in 1945. Petty Officer Second Class Owen Hammerberg. He received a non-combat Medal of Honor, a Navy non-combat Medal of Honor award. Now, he would not receive that today. He would receive what's called a Navy Marine Corps award. But I thought that was interesting that we had one guy who did not receive a Medal of Honor for combat, but he certainly deserved it. As to the role of Congress and the role of the president, Congress creates the Medal of Honor and passes legislation governing it. And the role of the president is to receive the recommendations that either approve them or disapprove them. And again, to go back to your point, I don't. If it gets so far as to reaching the president, that means it's been screened extensively. So the chances of it being disapproved,
it's unlikely for a president to use his power to say, yeah, you know what, lads, this is not good. It'll be a weird use of one's power, but yeah,
right.
It is. He gives the final sign off. I'm guessing in this case, yeah.
Right. And another point, I don't know if it's been made in any of your presentations, kind of a little bit off topic. The president, when he appeared before Congress on the 8th of December and gave his famous date, which will live in infamy speech, he was not, repeat, not declaring war on Japan. He was asking
Congress to do it,
declare war on Japan. I wanted to make sure that was clear.
Absolutely. I think that did come up on Monday's show. But yeah, he was asking permission. Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting, but we're not making a judgment. As you said, that all the Medal of Honors on December 7th were for U.S. Navy. That we must be clear. There were other personnel there. There were Army personnel on base, but for whatever reason, all the Medal of Honors that day went to the U.S. Navy. Well, and we have Cannon, of course, Marine Corps, but none to the Army that day.
Right. The only Medals of Honor went either to Navy, Naval Reserve, or Marine Corps personnel. They're all considered naval services. The two of the pilots, Army pilots, you have to remember back then the Army Air Forces was part of the Army because the Air Force was not a separate service then. Two of those guys got what are called, or officers got what are called Distinguished Service Crosses, which are second to the Medal of Honor. I want to go back to this time factor real quickly. In World War II, you saw how fast the medals were approved. The action was on December 7th, 1941, and President Roosevelt reviewed and approved the recommendations on March 4th, where you have in these days a Navy SEAL who did something in 2002 and did not receive his Medal of Honor until I think it was 2018. So,
wow.
I found that staggering. But
the wheels I guess the wheels turn faster in different points of history, but it does seem they do more checks and more. The process seems to take longer. We could do a whole speculation about why that would be, but it is interesting how fast they move. And I wonder again whether the speed of the awards has anything to do also with that kind of public opinion, publicity aspect of it in the Pearl Harbor, as we quantify it being such a monumental event, whether there was a need to perhaps push them through a little bit faster. I don't know. And that's again, just spitballing on my part there, but possibly. Right.
Yeah, the grade range, Seaman First Class Ward was the junior grade. He was an enlisted sailor, and the senior Medal of Honor recipient for December 7th was, of course, Rear Admiral Kidd, who was who had 2 stars and was a Rear Admiral.
So just about as wide a rider range as you can possibly have, pretty much. I mean,
right. It hit pretty much every grade within the naval service, and of course. First Lieutenant Cannon did not have a Navy grade, but his was the equivalent of a Navy lieutenant junior grade. How was the Medal of Honor presented to a living recipient? President Roosevelt, he presented, I know at least one, he presented one to Doolittle in person, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he did,
Or in the other cases, they were transmitted for posthumous awards to the next of kin by registered mail. Or in some cases, I think maybe they were sent to a nearby command that was near the next of kin, and maybe somebody from that command presented it.
Then presented, Again, there is no absolute hard and fast rule on this. It does seem to be based on individual cases. We've kind of covered some of these things there about the uniqueness of some of the medal they've done. We've done Kidd, and I think we've done a little bit. But if there's anything else you want to just go over now with some of those ones and myths around it, we can do that now.
Yeah, one thing about the Tomich Award is apparently at the time the Navy could not find any next of kin for Tomich, so the Medal of Honor was awarded to the destroyer escort named for Tomich. Now that's something that your audience should know, is that with the exception of Fuqua, and that's a real hot button issue for me, because Fuqua never had a ship named in his honor. The other Medal of Honor recipients for December 7th had a ship or ships named after them, and they were usually destroyer escorts, which were small destroyers made to kill submarines. But Tomich had a destroyer escort named for him. The Medal of Honor was presented to the ship. The ship was decommissioned. And because Tomich had died aboard Utah, the state of Utah made him an honorary citizen. So the state of Utah ended up with his Medal of Honor. Then the state of Utah finally returned it to the Navy. And then I believe it was 2006, 2007, in Croatia, again, going from memory, family members were found. So a Navy admiral, a 4-star officer, presented the Tomich Medal of Honor to the next of kin that they found for Tomich. It was quite an ordeal with the Tomich Medal of Honor. let's see, what was unique about the Arizona Medals of Honor? Two of them I thought were undeserved.
Yeah.
And one was deserved. Fuqua, without question, Fuqua's was deserved. The other two I have grave questions about. Common factors we've mentioned: staying at your duty station to the point of death or serious injury or wounding. That's one thing. Now, the Purple Heart, you're probably familiar with that. That is given for those who are killed. It's delivered to the next of kin, or missing in action, or a non-fatal wound. If it's a non-fatal wound, then obviously it's given to the service member personally. And that is just for combat wounding. And we saw that engraving on the grave of Lieutenant Commander Ferris, where he had received a Purple Heart and a Gold Star.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Well, we'll move on a bit. I'm conscious of time.
Sure.
There's a few more points there. We've talked about Tombstone promotions. Quite a number of these were, guys. We should mention the fact that some had come through the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. So that and some there was it 3 from the same class, 1910, if I remember correctly?
No, 4? I think they were all from different classes. Well, let me go with the survivors and the dead.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Remember that our population is 16 men. Now, of those 16 men, only 5 survived to receive their medals of honor. Of those 5, only 4 survived the war. I've already talked about.
Yeah.
It's either Casson or Cason Young being killed at the naval battle of Guadalcanal. So only 4 survived to die natural deaths. How are the Medal of Honor recipients remembered? As I said before, ships were named for them, primarily destroyer escorts. The destroyer escort does not exist today as a ship. The closest thing is a fast frigate. Medal of Honor, a lot of buildings were named for Medal of Honor recipients. Tomich Hall is at the Naval Station, Rhode Island. Building is named for Finn at Kaneohe Bay on Oahu. Medal of Honor sites today, as I mentioned before, only 2 ships from December 7th are still there in Pearl Harbor, Arizona, and Utah. And the Tombstone Promotions is kind of interesting. It's as best I can determine, if like Fuqua retired as a captain, and had he been Joe Smith Fuqua, he would have remained a captain. But because he had a Medal of Honor, he was bumped up to Rear Admiral. But I don't think that meant an increase in pay. All it meant was an increase in honor. He could he could be addressed as Rear Admiral Fuqua. He could wear the insignia of a Rear Admiral. And as we saw, the reason for the name is that is engraved on his tombstone. Yeah.
And it's interesting, just this classification of, the kind of when you get into honorary grades there. But I'm particularly looking forward to you talking about Brigadier General Billy Mitchell, because he's something of a kind of a legendary figure in aviation history, and you wanted to mention him.
Yeah, let me hit the Naval Academy graduates real fast.
Sure. Yeah.
The Naval Academy graduates were Kidd and Van Valkenburg aboard Arizona, Casson Young aboard Vestal, Binyan aboard the West Virginia, and I can't remember the other one right now. But the interesting thing about these guys that's really spooky, it's really eerie. If you look at their yearbook, the annuals for their class that honors their class, there's commentary made about the personalities of these guys. And some of the personality capsules are eerily or just spooky about being predictive of these guys' behavior on December 7th.
Wow.
Yeah, it was another surprise find. The reason I put Billy Mitchell in there is because obviously December 7th was his vindication. It was his proof that air power was superior to sea power. And and this is what my favorite slide here. It says, this is from the Army-Navy football game on November 29th, 1941, just before the attack on Oahu. And it says, a bow-on view of USS Arizona as she plows into a huge swell. It is significant that despite the claims of air enthusiasts, which is clearly a slap at Billy Mitchell.
It's a having a pop at Mitchell, right. Yeah.
No battleship has yet been sunk by bombs. Now that's true if you are talking about in combat. It is false if you are talking about a battleship being sunk, because remember that Billy Mitchell did the ship sinking trials off the North Carolina and Virginia coasts in the 1920s, and he sank the old battleships. Even though that was not in combat conditions, he proved he could sink a battleship. So this is one of the ironic slides. And I don't know how I found this. So much of this stuff just came to me, I guess, from...
You're one of those people, like a lot of my guests, it's just been a lifelong... I get asked all the time, when did you start getting interested in World War II? And I go, I literally don't remember not being interested in World War II. As far as I'm concerned, it's my entire life. So, you know.
Yeah. My father flew 28 combat missions as the radar operator of a B-29, with those missions being over Japan in 1945. And so ever since I was old enough to talk to him, I've been interested in World War II. My interest in the Medals of Honor did not hit until 1999 when I first went to Oahu. And I said, holy hell, there's no guidebook for the World War II sites on Oahu. So I found the sites, took probably many illegal pictures, and I made a guidebook. And then I said, holy hell, there's nothing about the Medal of Honor recipients. So I wrote a book about the Medal of Honor recipients. So that's why I have those two books that you'll probably mention at the end.
Well, and again, folks, the links to Charles's books are in the description below. But we talked a little bit at the beginning about your sources. That obviously you start with the citations, but there's commanding officer reports, there's other things. So the clear thing when you get a copy of your book is, when you look at it, is that this is the result of not just a few weeks' work. This is the result of years of work. And I love when historians come on who've been spending literally years working on something. So beyond the obvious sources, where did you get some information for your book?
Well, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, like probably most people will say. And being a lawyer, I'm very pessimistic about myself. So I tend to focus on the mistakes instead of the good things I've done. But one of the smartest things I ever did in my life was, as soon as I got interested in these guys, I sent in what's called a standard form 180. And you'll find that on the internet site for the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, Missouri. And what happens is you send in that standard form 180. I send in a standard form 180 for all of the Medal of Honor recipients. And you talk about slow government in action. It literally takes months to get a response. And because of privacy concerns, you may not get very much information, but you may get a lot. I was hoping to get more because these guys were Medal of Honor recipients, but in some cases I just didn't get that much. But that was a kind of the heart of some of my information. And you just have to be alert to the general public. Another place where these guys are mentioned is in some of the investigations. I think there were 8 or 9 investigations of the attack on December 7th. I know that Fuqua gave testimony at one of them, and he was so mild-mannered. I always thought this was funny because you can read it in the hearings verbatim. Fuqua was so mild-mannered when he was testifying before the Roberts Commission that he had to be asked twice to speak up because they just couldn't hear him. And
Wow.
that goes with his calm demeanor on.
One day someone will do a study into psychologically what makes these heroes. Is there something inherent in their DNA? When you said about the fact there were comments in their kind of yearbook annual things that suggested they were going to be this type of character. Is there something in a hero that is unique to a hero? It's a fascinating insight, and I'm sure psychologists and psychiatrists could actually sort of shed some light on. Perhaps there's a particular strand of human behavior that makes someone heroic, and yet also at the same time, you said they're humble. The fact he didn't speak very loudly is also an interesting aspect. But I want to move on.
Let me go back to the. I was going to say West Point. Let me go back to the Naval Academy guys just for a minute, because I remembered all 5 names. They're Young, Kidd, Van Valkenburg, and Binyan, and I left out one of my favorites, and that was Fuqua. He was one of the Naval Academy graduates, and the summary for him in the yearbook indicates that he was a caretaker. He looked after his fellow Academy members, and that's exactly what he did on December 7th. He looked after his fellow crew members.
Yeah. Well, we've got your photos now that you supplied us. So obviously some of them we know what we are, but we'll go through those, then we'll bring things to an end. So obviously that's the famous one there. But any insights about it that you think our viewers should know about it?
Yeah. Now this is obviously the Arizona Memorial. The ship is perpendicular to the memorial. Yeah. The memorial stretches from the port side to the starboard side. And the reason I chose this photo was because I caught the American flag above it in a pretty straight or a flat condition. And you see those trees behind you, behind the memorial, that is Ford Island. And the back wall back there is that wall of the missing and dead. Yeah. And you'll see the name of Kidd and Van Valkenburg, but their medals of honor are not indicated on those walls.
Interesting.
Now, this is a mooring key, Quay. Some people call them Ks, but this is, again, Arizona with BB meaning battleship, 39 is the whole number. And this is what's called a mooring key. And this is what the ships were moored to by lines. Don't say rope, because I don't think that's a Navy term. They were moored to these by lines. And these are right off Ford Island. And you can see in the background the bridge leading from the mainland to Ford Island. Yeah. Because Ford Island is an island in the Pearl Harbor. Now, this is... I'm giving you guys a $5,000 shot here, because I'm saving you $5,000 or more to take a trip to Oahu, but you wouldn't see it anyway because it's off limits to civilians. This is the memorial for Utah. It's a little bit old because now there's a sign out front to the right that has some information about Tomich and shows a Medal of Honor. If you look at the lower left, you'll see this ghastly rusted hulk. Yeah. Now, the Oklahoma, which capsized, was righted, but and towed away, and it sank in the Pacific. They tried to attach cables to Utah and pull it over, but they gave up. So that's why Utah is still there.
And we have it again there as well, don't we?
Oh yeah, it's just a ghastly sight. And I think it's an environmental nightmare.
It's less well understood than the Arizona for
absolutely.
I guess for moral reasons. It's just people know what they know, and it's just interesting. Yeah. But there's another interesting sort of unique one.
Yeah, this is another one that you guys will never see because it's near the shipyard and in base housing at Naval Station Pearl Harbor. This is the memorial for for Nevada. This is where Nevada grounded. It's called Hospital Point. And if you went across to the left into those trees, that's where the ship ultimately was grounded, and that was called Nevada Point. But both Warrant Officer Ross and Chief Warrant Officer Hill have their names on that plaque you see, but unfortunately it says Congressional Medal of Honor rather than Medal of Honor.
Yeah, which is a bugbear of all of us. But we've got We'll just sum up there with basically how people can find more information, because obviously this show has been an amazing resource. But folks, this is how thick the book is. If you can see that, we have scratched the surface of information in the show tonight. There's lots more in the book. You've also penned an article for After the Battle, which of course anybody who's British here grew up with After the Battle, as I did. Used to go down to their shop in London when I was a teenager and buy all their books and stuff like that. There's also information, as you're pointing out there, on the Congress, which again is misnomer, the Congressional Medal of Honor Society and the Medal of Honor Society of the United States. And also they can contact you directly if they've got questions or they've got further resource. I'm assuming you'd like to hear from Janet, whose mother's cousin was Canon. I'm assuming you'd like to make contact with Janet for a start.
Yeah, now I will make first of all, I want to thank you for having me on the show. And number two, I will make an offer to your audience. If I revise the presentation, and if anybody wants the revised presentation, and I added a lot more material, I have an addendum we weren't able to get to.
Yeah,
I intend to put my revised presentation together with my addendum, and if anybody wants a copy of that, there's my email address. Yeah. And I will mail you a copy of that. Now, it's going to take me a few days to put it together.
Yeah, no, I should specify, because in terms of the visual today, folks, I literally put the basic. Charles sent me a massive, great Word document with all the element extracts and citations, extracts of both. It was way too much information to put up on screen because we just how we function on World War II TV. But yeah. There's this presentation, there's all that extra level of detail that Charles can provide later on. And so, yeah, email details are there. And in terms of your next project, what are you working on now? Because historians never give up. They just keep on working on new things. So obviously you're still looking at revising and amending your information about this. But are you going to be tackling any other campaigns or looking at the Medal of Honors for Iwo Jima or Midway? Where's it going to stop for you?
Well, in 2017, I thought after I'd worked on the Medal of Honor for December 7th from 1999 to 2017, I thought I'm through with this. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then all of a sudden, I got contacted by the Medal of Honor Historical Society, and I got dragged back in this subject matter. So I'm going to try once again to extract myself from it after I put my materials together. And again, my offer to send the presentation stands, and you'll have my email address there.
Yeah. And people can get in contact with me, of course, as well, and I can pass you if they don't want to get contact you directly. We can do that. And yeah, it's just been amazing. So I've had several requests already from viewers to bring you back in the future, and we have other subjects that we discussed, that we could discuss, that we can discuss in the future, that we may bring up, Navy crosses and things like that. But for one show, it was a brilliant start. So I'll just remind folks what we've got coming up tomorrow, and I'll come and say goodbye to you in a second, Charles. So folks, okay. Sadly, Pearl Harbor week comes to a conclusion tomorrow when we're actually taking the events forward. Craig Simons, and if you don't know who Craig Simons is, he's probably the greatest living U.S. naval historian around. He's going to be talking about the Battle of Coral Sea. So not just the Battle of Coral Sea, but how the U.S. Navy went from Pearl Harbor to the Coral Sea and the events in between. And we'll talk about that battle there. And we'll just be another conversation like the one I had with Drac on Monday. It'll be kind of a conversation between he and I, and he is looking forward to it. That's his first appearance on World War II TV. And then I've got Sunday off, and then Monday we start 3 weeks of programming about the Battle of the Bulge, although, of course, I am taking some days off for Christmas because I do have a life outside of this, believe it or not. So, folks, as usual, please consider becoming a patron. Please go out there and buy Charles's book. I'm holding it up again. If you're interested in heroism, if you're interested in that day and understanding it beyond the frame of reference of just the sinking of the ships, it gives you that context of those that are saving lives, those that are still trying to fight back. It's a fantastic addition to your library there. So that's that. And as usual, right now, it just remains me to say thank you very much, Charles, for joining us. And We did nearly 2 hours in the end, so that was all right. So so good.
I did want to tell you that right next door in my garage, I have 8 fully automatic weapons.
Yes.
And I am talking to you from my house, not from a federal penitentiary. So that means that I own those weapons legally. And they're World War II vintage. So if you want to bring me back for a program on World War II machine guns, which I have shot, and I can attest to that by a sore shoulder.
Sore shoulder and burnt hands.
And burnt fingers, yes, and exploding barrels and machine guns. If you want me to do a program on World War II machine guns, I would be glad to do that.
We've already done one on World War II machine guns, but we could do a second one. We can do that sometime in the future. And again, thank you very much for offering your services. Your enthusiasm is fantastic. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to bring things to an end. So, folks, this is Paul Woodadge for World War II TV. I hope you've enjoyed today's show, and I will see you all again tomorrow for the final part of Pearl Harbor. As usual, your comments, your questions, your remarks in the sidebar are fantastic. Thank you for being part of this community. We are growing all the time. But right now, I'm going to end the show and say enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody. Good night.